There's something I find intrinsically fascinating about the USA. Growing up across the Atlantic, it seemed like almost a fantastical place. The empty roadside diner in the middle of nowhere, the perfectly straight roads across vast open deserts, the millions of acres of untouched mountains and forests. Yes, this is a land of both natural and constructed wonders. There are many firsts here, many bests, many amazing things to see, but weirdly, that's not what interests me. There is a part of America that I find almost more fascinating than any other. It is the places between the superlatives, the places that most folks just fly over or drive through, the medium cities of America. Over a third of the entire country lives in these medium cities, and yet they hardly get any attention. And don't get me wrong, I love big cities, but there is something about these medium, these average, these medium cities that I think is very special. If there's anywhere left in this once great nation that the American dream still lives on, it's there. And so, in a quest to combine the average with the superlative, I have set myself a task to try and find the most American city of all of these medium cities. And what does that mean exactly? Well, I have some ideas, but first, let's go look at some stats, shall we? So, we have to first consider what we mean when we say city. Now, in the US, city just means incorporated settlement. And there are cities with an official population as small as just a single person. So clearly that's not actually a good measure of what we believe a city to be in common parlance. So to get around that particular problem, I'm defining a city as a place with more than 100,000 people. Now, this is not an official number. There's a few sources that do go with this officially. There are other options. People go up and down the scale. But in terms of what I believe is a city, and looking through the list of cities on that boundary, I feel 100,000 is a pretty good number. Now, the second thing is that when you count that population, you can't just count within the actual city boundary. If you look at the boundary of, say, Denver, it's nothing like what you would actually draw if someone handed you a map and said, draw where Denver is. This is true for most American cities. And so instead of using the city boundary and the city population, we're instead going to use the US Census Bureau's idea of metro areas and their population. They've done all the hard work of figuring out what it means to be a metro area, when to group cities together that are next to each other, like Denver and Aurora, and when not to, like San Francisco and San Jose, and done all the hard work and come up with a full list of metro areas in the US with population numbers. So that's where I'm going to start. However, population is not the be-all end-all of everything. I'm not just going to go look at the entire list of cities that have more than 100,000 people and pick the exact middle of it. That's not sensible. That doesn't reflect, I think, what we mean when we say the most American city. It's not the right set of averages. It's not the right demographics. And so the key thing is this census data set contains way more than population. In fact, there are, I think, over 100 different demographic variables and pieces of information about the areas. And so I've chosen to take a few of these and essentially rank cities on how average, specifically how median they are, on a series of different demographics, and then weight those by how important I think they are. Now, of all the different statistics and demographic information that this Census Bureau dataset gives us, there were a few that caught my eye when I was initially writing this sort of initial code to figure out what my subset of cities to consider were. But at the end of the day, I wanted to narrow it down a bit more than that. And I sort of played around with the categories I included in the weights until I got to an output I felt was actually pretty representative of Middle America. And so the final things I chose are weighting on population, the average income, the average rent, the average age, and the average number of immigrants. I feel this is, based on my experience, a pretty good way of modeling some of the different main variables that affect American society. And also crucially, as I was playing around with the weightings in these categories, this is the list that at the end of the day felt most right. And I've done my homework. I have taken this list, before I started filming any of this, to a series of Americans I trust. And I've asked those Americans, how average does this list feel to you? And I have to say, feedback was pretty universally positive in that everyone looks at the list and goes, man, these are some really average places. So I feel I've done pretty well there. And so with all that background work, I ran the script, and the script takes the US Census data for metro areas, cuts off everything below 100,000 people, weights all the different metro areas by their distance from the median and a variety of different demographics and statistics, and then adds up that weighted average and tells me the 20 most average by this weighting places in the US. This is the list. Now, I'll keep the list on screen here for a little bit, but I'm sure many of you are familiar with at least some of the places. I'm hoping most of you who are Americans are going, man, these really are some pretty average places that I kind of don't think much about. Perfect, that's what we want. And if you're outside the US, I would hope that you've probably never been to any of these places unless you've been to some kind of boring business conference there. They're certainly not your usual holiday destinations. But particularly the top 10 on the list here, which is Kalamazoo, Medford, Tyler, Topeka, Lake Charles, Columbia, Wilmington, Amarillo, Dover, and Longview, they're pretty average, I feel. And each of them have interesting stuff. And this is the key point in my thesis and why I'm trying to do it this way. I don't think these places are boring. I think the average American city, this medium-sized city, is really interesting because they're a size where they're not so big that things are expensive. They're not so out of control that things have lost their character. These are cities that I think are still small enough to have some characters, have some unique things in them. And so this is the basis of my idea of if I'm going to try and find the most American city, I think I should start here. And if this video ended here, it'd be pretty disappointing, wouldn't it? But it doesn't, because this list is just a starting point. I wanted a shortcut to get a list of candidates for what is potentially the most American city, but I don't think it's a thing you can judge just from even more numbers. I could bring all the different dimensions and stats I like into this. It wouldn't help. I believe you have to actually go somewhere and see it and experience it and feel for yourself how close is this to that halcyon idea of the American dream. And so, well, there's 20 places. I've got some time, so I think it's time I got on a plane to Kalamazoo. Let's go. Well, good morning, and what a lovely autumn morning it is here in Kalamazoo. I have to say the weather is near perfect, at least for what I like, which is a little bit chilly. Either way, the drive down from Grand Rapids last night, very easy, less than an hour, basically a straight shot on a single highway, so that was wonderful. There is an airport here in Kalamazoo, but no direct flights from Denver, so for me, faster to fly to Grand Rapids and drive. Either way, so far, so good. I've got several things I want to do today, but first we're going to go and stop in downtown and try and get a bite to eat. So, Kalamazoo's downtown is this really interesting mix of old and new. Stuff from the city's founding in the 1800s through to some really interesting modernist architecture from very recently. And one fun fact I didn't know, this is the US's first ever outdoor pedestrianised mall. It's not quite as busy as it was in its heyday, I suspect, but it's still quite nice and pleasant, and there's people milling around even on a Sunday. Anyway though, there's more than just downtown. My next stop is something I'm very interested in as, well, let's say an aerospace nerd. It's off to the Air Zoo. Well, this really is an absolutely fantastic air and space museum. Not only do they have a really large number of exhibits, the docents are fantastic, they've got a bloody blackbird in there, they've got a nighthawk over in the other building over here. It's just really good. Like, I have no notes. It's a fantastic air museum, and to find it in this very average city in the middle of Michigan is a delightful surprise. So I've had a really lovely trip here. Great job to all the staff and volunteers here. Absolutely fantastic museum. That said, it's getting a little bit later in the day now. I want to go grab quite a late lunch, and so I'm going to go off to find what I think the most average American, I don't know, breakfast, brunch, lunch is, a diner. So let's go over there. Well, that was a very tasty lunch indeed. I heartily recommend the Crow's Nest if you are ever in Kalamazoo for whatever reason. Now though, I've got a few things I could go do. There is the Gibson Guitar Factory. Gibson Guitars actually started here in Kalamazoo before they moved to Nashville, and a group still runs the factory here and gives tours. However, the factory tours are not open on Sundays, and it's Sunday, so can't go do that. Battle Creek, a little bit to the east of here, has some interesting stuff, including a museum of the weird inventions that Dr. Kellogg made before he made the breakfast cereal, though given his history as a eugenicist and the museum being in a slightly weird religious-y place, I'm going to take a pass on that one as well. Instead, I'm going to go see some nature. It is absolutely glorious autumn here. Like, the trees are some incredibly beautiful colours. And so there's a rail trail, that is a railway line converted into a hiking cycle path, that goes 30 miles from Kalamazoo all the way to the Great Lakes shore. And so I'm going to go out there, probably walk the first half mile or mile of that, just to enjoy the scenery and then see what I want to do after that. Let's go. Well, this has been a really lovely hike, and I say hike, more like a walk, but still, beautiful trail, leaves are in a beautiful array of colours, lovely weather, just a great time here, and loads of friendly locals and dogs. Sadly, no video of the dogs. I promise you I'll try and get some next time. Anyway though, I'm heading back, and it's been a long day, done quite a bit, so I want a little bit more sustenance. I'm going to find a donut and, given it's Michigan, a lake. So let's go do that.
As I'm here editing this video, I am now reflecting on this trip to Kalamazoo. Obviously, it was the first trip of this type. I've got nothing really to compare it against or rank it against in terms of best or least middle American city. But there are some things I want to discuss, right? First of all, as I kind of suspected before I left in that first segment you saw, there is a lot there, right? Like, I kind of felt that these middle cities would have plenty of things of their own, and there are. Not just notable singular things like the Air Zoo, which is, again, an incredible air and space museum, huge fan of that place, but also just in terms of restaurants and cafes and other places to go. Like in this video, I go to, 2 or 3 places, all of which are fantastic. I do want to call out Chocolatey right at the end. Really lovely concept of combining both good chocolate and good tea. Please go if you're nearby. But these are just a few of the places I could have gone to. There is a wealth of really good, well-rated options that had like good write-ups in local papers and on Google reviews and similar. So like, it's not like I found and cherry-picked the very best. It's just a sampling of what's there. And I think that's really interesting. There's also other things to do around the area. On my drive back from Kalamazoo to Grand Rapids the day after the main piece of filming here, I went to a local classic car museum. I think one of the biggest in the US is my understanding. I was only there for a couple of hours, but again, incredible collection. I'm not a huge classic car buff, but still really fun to go look at them. I think I was the youngest person there by about 20 years, but that's fine. It's still, I want to appreciate some of what they have. And this is not just the only thing nearby. And of course, it's the US, right? Nearby is an hour's drive in many of these parts of the US, but that's kind of fine. I've come to sort of live with that. Like, I'm okay thinking of like an hour's drive through the countryside. That's pretty close now in my personal estimation. So it's not just the places you see in this video, right? And there's still plenty more to do. And in fact, I feel I could go back to Kalamazoo in the area for a couple more days and not be bored, which I think is really interesting for a place that most people have probably never even heard of, even if they live in the US. Probably even if they live in states next to Michigan, right? It's probably one of those things I had to live relatively close to know that Kalamazoo really exists. Now, the other thing about the whole thing was it feels very livable. Like, walking around there, like, and it's not just, obviously, look, the house prices, they're lower than Denver. They're not low in an absolute sense, right? All of the US has a housing crisis, basically. But it's got that element where you don't queue for anything, really. Like, it's not super busy, right? Like, in big cities, like, you get this idea of, like, well, everything's kind of, being pulled at the edges a little bit, right? The resources are being frayed. This is a very American thing. A lot of American big cities don't actually build infrastructure and transport and similar things enough as their populations grow. But Kalamazoo is still a size where that doesn't matter. It's kind of exactly the right size for its infrastructure and for the businesses and the layout it's got. And so it was just a really nice time. I just had a great time going around, meeting people. Everyone was incredibly friendly, as you kind of would expect, right? But like, just super lovely. A few of them were indeed puzzled why exactly I was there, and I tried to explain, but it's not exactly easy to get that across. But overall, just a really, really pleasant time, right? Like, if you wanted to settle down and have a, I'm not going to say, it's not boring, right? It's more of a predictable, normal life. Kalamazoo seems like a pretty reasonable place to do it. Everything you'd want is there. It's a big enough city that all the services and businesses you need they're present. You're not going to go wanting for them. You're not driving an hour to try and get this one kind of shop that isn't in your city. So that's really nice. But as you can tell, it was autumn when I recorded the majority of this video on the trip to Kalamazoo. It is not autumn now. In fact, right now it is spring. I took the winter off from doing this, mostly due to the fact that pretty much all the cities I want to go to are not a place you'd want to go to, and at least compare to Kalamazoo in the autumn, right? Like, I went there probably the best and most perfect time of year, and so it's going to benefit very well from that in my perception. But I don't want to go to somewhere in, like, say, the northeast in the middle of winter. It's going to suck. In addition, this video is kind of me learning a bit more how to do travel logs, right? Like, the idea of having to record 500 pieces of B-roll and put them together, still working on it, right? This is the first version. I'll get better at that, but it is getting used to the idea of, like, how do you deal with this many clips and ingest them and put them together. That's a fun editing process that I'm really going to appreciate some shows that I do know and how they handle this. That said, I am back. I am now in the space in the year where I can travel and go do stuff, and the weather is pretty reasonable. Probably not going to go to some places further south, like Texas in the summer. Maybe leave that to this autumn. So I'm going to go through the list basically as I can, as it makes sense, and as I think the weather is in a sort of roughly appropriate median place. So we'll get some of those, but in the meantime, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will be back with more, and I'll see you there.